Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you guys for joining us today. My name is Katya. I'm with the Association of Compost Producers. Today we have three great panelists, Cesar Mendoza, Braeden Cohen, and Lynn Fang. Um, we are going to be talking about their very different and very interesting careers in the composting industry. We're recording this webinar. We're going to put it up on YouTube and on our website later for folks to watch. Hoping to use this also as an opportunity for professional development for folks that are either students or in school or thinking about a career transition, hoping to get into the sustainability space and demystifying a little bit of what compost is like and how you might find a foothold in it. Um, Really grateful to all of our panelists for being here. So I'm going to go ahead and just jump right in. We've got a couple of guided questions today. If you guys have questions that come up as we're talking, go ahead and throw them in the chat, and I will direct them to our panelists when we get to it. And yeah, it's going to be pretty casual, just conversational style webinar. So really glad that you guys are here. All right. So our very first question um, for our panelists is really just to give us an overview on how you guys got started in the space. So if you want to, Caesar, maybe I can start with you. Can
Sure.
you tell us how you got into composting? Maybe give us a little bit of an overview of your story.
Sure. So I've been in the waste industry in one shape, form, or another, both recycling, collection, landfilling, you name it. I think I've been exposed to just about everything, including organics, of course. My background is actually quality assurance, quality control, way back when. And I took a leap into a company that was looking for a foreman to run a MRF. And that was my first exposure into the waste industry. And then they had a small little green waste line that collected, you know, maybe 100 tons of material per week. So it was really little. From there, I just stayed within the waste industry. Um, my first true exposure to composting was here locally. I live in Southern California, Riverside to be exact, and the facility that I worked at, Burtake Waste Industries, has a CASP system that basically processed about 2,500 tons per week. And I got pretty good at it and enjoyed it very much. If anybody who's been doing this long enough, it changes daily. So that was my exposure to composting and still current with sustainable generation. As far as the technology, I'm now, you know, going out and visiting customers who are still putting out systems and producing and composting, and those that I can help, I help as much as I can.
Awesome. Thanks, Caesar. Braden, do you want to answer the same question? Give us a little bit of background of how you got into
Sure.
composting.
Yeah. So my first exposure to composting was as a child. My dad composted, and that was just putting food scraps and only food scraps in a tumbler and letting it digest. Really, um, but I was pre-med in college studying environmental science, and I decided I don't want to be a doctor. I want to approach public and environmental health through sustainable agriculture. Tried the whole organic farming thing. Wasn't quite the lifestyle for me. And I'm like, well, how can I help support sustainable agriculture? And I saw that composting was a thing. I went to Ithaca College, and New York State's first commercial food waste composting facility was located just 15 minutes away from where I lived. And I decided, it was like, this is a great opportunity. We have, a national and global waste problem, and I can help support and help make compost and help support healthy soil and sustainable agriculture and healthy communities. And fell in love with it pretty immediately. And ironically, managing compost was my least favorite part of my job's farming. Um, but from there, managing a commercial windrow facility, I bounced around doing community composting projects with the New York City Composting Project at the New York Botanical Gardens, worked for a local nature center, wound up in California, or I established and designed an ASP facility in Westchester County by partnering and working for a local family-owned waste management company called Sustainable Materials Management. And then I found myself in California working with black soldier fly larvae, doing a slightly different form of organic waste recycling, focusing on the commercialization of insect frass as a horticultural and agricultural soil amendment and fertilizer and plant biostimulant. And when that came to a close, I kind of started doing some consulting, doing regulatory consulting for soil and fertilizer companies, helping them out with CDFA, product registration, organic listing. And I then also simultaneously was looking into switching from composting for waste management to composting for mortuary purposes. As some of you may know, human composting, also known as natural organic reduction, is now legal in California and in 14 states. So, through my pursuit of establishing my own natural organic reduction facility in California, I started a sustainable funeral home called Life Source, where we offer not just human composting, but all of the legal forms of disposition in California. Still hope to build my facility, need $5 million ish. I also need California to codify the regulations and start accepting applications. But yeah, still involved with ACP and love supporting composters and soil blenders and everything through the regulatory consulting I do.
Awesome. Anybody got $5 million for Braeden to start his human composting site? That's awesome. I love the wiggle around and the innovation there. Lynn, you also have some really innovative work that you're doing. Would you be able to give us that same overview of how you got into it and where you're at now?
Yeah, thanks, Katya. So I didn't grow up with composting, but I discovered it at some point at the end of my undergrad and was already on like a molecular biology track and was in like biochemistry research labs for a while, but I ended up doing my master's at the University of Vermont on compost ecology. And we were looking at using compost to suppress root rot plant disease. And I was able to collect compost from a lot of different local producers and got to visit a lot of local compost facilities and farmers. I also got the opportunity to teach the compost ecology course at UVM for a number of years. And I finished with my master's in 2015, came back to California where I had grown up and have was pretty much involved with community compost projects. I started a project at an urban farm. They went through some restructuring after about a year, but we collected some really great data at that site and have been involved with developing community compost and farming projects in the Los Angeles County area. I joined the LA Compost team at some point and have been supporting them with their best management practices, compost quality, educational offerings. We developed the community soil health and microscopy program there. And I'm still there part-time. It's been probably about over 8 years that I've been supporting LA Compost. And currently just doing some more like staff education. And I support other community organizations. There's one called Integrative Development Initiative in Pomona that has done a lot of community compost and farming work as well. And we've also done some community soil health type of work as well. And I started my own business, SoilWise, almost 3 years ago now, and encompasses various things from landscaping to I created my own online course on soil microscopy assessments, and it's hosted on the 131 School of Compost platform by James McSweeney. And so we've been running that like on an annual basis. I got to teach that. I think it was last year at USCC, which was really fun. So a lot of like soil microscopy education. We're starting to do like more formal assessments now too. Um, and then, we're very connected to friends and community in Altadena. So I feel like we were kind of called in to support with the soil contaminant testing and bioremediation work after the fire. And that's a lot of what we've been doing in the last year and a half since the fire. And we're still doing landscaping. We're doing a lot of compost extract applications. Sometimes we do like customized soil blends. We help people with diseased plants or their farms are suffering, something's going wrong. We help them bring it back to life. And we're also starting to kind of develop landowner partnerships to create our own compost and soil blends. So that's the eventual goal, is to have our own product line essentially of compost and soil blends targeted to different applications. And I've also done a lot of teaching. I've taught at Cal Poly Pomona and Pitzer College on compost ecology, but I think higher ed is having some enrollment challenges, so those budgets have been cut. But it was fun. It was fun doing it for a couple of years.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. Braeden, did you have something you want to jump in with?
So just to let Lynn know that I'm available if you ever want to talk regulations and registering products.
Yeah, I might have to hit you up at that point.
Absolutely.
I like that we have this whole range here. So like Cesar sort of coming in from the waste side and like the large scale stuff. Braeden, you coming in a bit more from the like organic agriculture, sustainable agriculture lens. And then Lynn, obviously also from that side, but like really, really deep in the like soil microbiology. I feel like that really is sort of the whole spectrum that we see evolving in the compost industry right now.
Yeah, it's been really cool, working with compost at all different scales, and from the backyard to the community to the industrial, and getting to learn all the different systems and technologies, and how different but also how similar it is, because all based on the same core tenets of composting.
Makes me think of that saying, right? It takes a village,
Yeah.
because it takes all aspects of, all these realms that we're talking about to make this happen. Whether it's large scale, middle scale, or small scale, it really does. That's the one exposure I've seen in all of composting. So for sure.
Yeah, we used to teach with Ellie Compost home composting workshops and that was funded by the Burbank Recycling Center, because that was part of their strategy to reduce waste going into their waste stream, was to get people
Mhm.
to compost at home. So that's also part of the solution, part of the industry as well.
I love that. Yeah. I like to say that the compost problem is so big, it's going to take everybody and their mother on board.
Maybe even
And I
the
think that,
grandparents.
and the grandparents too, and the little kids. But I think we can also think about that from the soil health perspective, right? It's both the problem of organic waste that we need to deal with, and also the problem of soil health. Our soils across California, but also the nation and the world are so degraded. And we know compost is really, I would say, relatively easy and fast way of sort of jumpstarting bringing that soil health back compared to some longer term soil health building practices. So kudos to you guys. And now that I'm sort of teeing this up as like the challenges that we're facing as, I'll say as an industry, but also just like as the compost ecosystem. What challenges have you guys specifically run into in your careers?
My biggest challenge that I've seen in the last, geez, directly with organics and composting 9 years has been the back end. All these companies are receiving material and they're saying, yeah, bring it, bring it, bring it. And then when it gets through the gate and it's on your floor to process, right? Regardless of the technology, regardless of how fast you can do it, it's the back end. Like, a lot of customers just don't set themselves up for success by having an outlet for this material. My number one question on any new project or any customer, whether I'm consulting or whether I'm a project manager, is okay, who's your customers? Where is this going? What kind of quality do you need? What kind of contamination do you, I mean, all these questions, that sometimes really do not get asked. And I'm sorry for any engineers who are on here, but engineers who set up projects don't ask these questions. And it's always, it lands on somebody's lap when it's already there. You got these tons coming in, and my God, you're looking at, 6, 9, 11% contamination by weight. How do I clean this up? How do I do this? Who's going to take this? Like that, to me, that's been the biggest challenge because regardless of what technology, regardless of what type of process you put your material through, it's going to do what it's going to do, right? As long as it's done correctly and it's maintained and you practice, you know, best management practices and all of that. But yeah, if you don't have a home for it and you start stockpiling this material and it's not moving, that's what I've seen as one of the biggest challenges and almost the number one question, from existing customers to upcoming customers. It's like, okay, how do I do? What do I do? And it's like, oh God, now we're reinventing the wheel. We're reverse engineering this. So to me personally, that's been one of my biggest challenges now. And when I ran the facility, and I managed and supervised and had operators and mechanics and all that stuff, that's the number one thing I've seen as a big challenge. Um, Personally, at home, getting my own family to understand that food waste does not go in the trash. We have a green sparrow, we have an organic tub, and God help me when I travel and come back home and I find stuff where it doesn't belong, and I'm just like, so on a personal level, that's been one of my biggest challenges.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen that, on the smaller scale and community sites. It's right sizing the amount of organic material, a certain square footage of area that's being used for composting can actually be able to manage and process. Another thing I've seen in the community garden space is like nobody, I mean, and this is true for industrial facilities too, because they're just kind of helping to process waste and they need to move the material off site. So it doesn't really get to sit and mature. And that's true in community settings too. People are so anxious to use organic matter, to use the compost in their garden beds. It doesn't get a chance to mature. People are using it like very quickly. And so that's another challenge. Sometimes people are like, fighting over the compost that they can use in these kind of garden settings. Um, and yeah, definitely like it's easy to get overloaded if you're taking food waste from like a food bank and you're a small site, you're trying to be ambitious. So that's definitely a major challenge that we've also seen.
Lynn, is that
I
challenge? Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
I
Braden.
would say you can ask Lynn a follow-up.
I was gonna say, Lynn, is that like a specific challenge that you've seen in your career, or is that something that you see just like broadly at community compost sites?
Yeah, that's something I've seen at a lot of the community compost sites that are at community gardens. Um, and yeah, like I think Cass just posted too that she got way too much food waste from like a food bank drop. And it's really exciting to get so much material, but it can be really challenging if you don't have the kind of labor capacity to be able to process that in the right amount of time. So that, yeah, that happens at all scales for sure.
And then what you were saying that there's people that are really like chomping at the bit to use this compost. What happens with that? Do you have situations where they're using like not totally finished compost and then that has like negative impacts, or can you expand on that?
Yeah, you get a little bit less consistency in terms of your germination and plant health. And some people, maybe don't need that level of precision. Like, they just want to get that organic matter in the soil. There's a farmer I've worked with out in Ontario, and he was, I told him like his compost would be better if he would let it mature and sit. And he wasn't listening to me until, unfortunately, he had to get forced off of his property. He had to relocate and downsize to a different property. And then he had all this compost that ended up sitting for like a year just in that transition. And then when he started using that compost, he noticed that it was a lot better. It produced a lot better germination, a lot better plants, much healthier plants. And he called me and was like, I never listened to you. I was never going to do what you said until I was forced to make it happen. And now I see what you were saying, and it was totally true. And I understand why it's important now. So that happens, it's human nature. Sometimes we're forced into shifting our mindsets and behaviors. And that's true for just even getting people to be interested in composting and want to start composting as well.
That's a great segue, Lynn, because I was going to say that, like, I think, one of the biggest challenges has been getting community buy-in and getting people to care. And that, really also comes down to what Cesar was saying about contamination rates. It's like at the end of the day, whether it's, the general public putting contaminated material into the green bins, which is making its way to facilities, or whether it's, grocery store employees not properly sorting for the mandated diversion organics diversion that they have to do, or really at any level, how do you get the general public to care enough to take that little bit of extra time to sort their waste properly? And I saw this back in 2012 when I got out of college and was working at Cayuga Compost. One of the biggest issues was contamination and how the company felt like they couldn't. They had to accept a certain level of contamination to get a certain tonnage or to get a certain contract, say from like a local school district who didn't want to sort their milk cartons. And even though, oh, it's paper, it's like, no, it's not just paper. There's plastic on either side of that paper. So, or whether, it was fear of people, dropping at that point what was was a purely voluntary service. They didn't have to pay extra for organic waste recycling services, and they didn't want to rock the boat and kind of get their customers to work a little bit harder so they could have cleaner compost. So and then just another kind of challenge, which may be personal to me, but coming from a liberal arts education, going into compost facility operations is a huge culture shock. Working with an entirely different group of people, like people who aren't necessarily in it because they love composting. They're doing it because it's a job, and or maybe they have like a purely like operations background, or so like there's a learning curve for folks on who are crunchy liberals who get into composting, where they're up against not up against but are now working with people who may not have the same social or political beliefs as them, and you have to learn how to work with different people. um, So that was, I think that's always really important to keep in mind, and when it comes to getting into this kind of work, if you're coming from a pathway similar to mine and a background similar of mine.
One quick comment, Brennan. You made me think of something that I just realized, in traveling for work from one state to another, from the East Coast to the West Coast. And you talked about contamination and at what level is acceptance, and at what level can you kick back and say, hey, this is too contaminated. It's no longer this, it's trash.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Come to find out, and I don't know if anybody else knows, but there is one number that a hauler can stand by before you can say, no, this is too much. Does anybody know what that number is? It'll shock you if you don't know. It's
5%.
24% contamination by weight.
Oh my
So the
goodness.
only time, and it is written in their contracts,
So when it's by weight, how does that look like?
it looks like trash.
Bad, right? It's
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
So
because we just did a decontamination palette last year, and just by thinking 24, it's like, yeah, a
correct.
lot.
So all the big haulers, I'm not going to name names, but they all have it in their contracts that, hey, well, you accept the 24%. So you either clean it or you take it and, dispose of it as you wish. But yeah, it amazed me how from one coast to the other, that is the magic number. And it's sad.
Yeah,
It's
that's
sad. It's like,
yeah, I've even
Yeah.
heard in the LA green bin program, sometimes people are putting so much trash in their green bins, which was supposed to start collecting food waste, they end up just getting dumped in the landfill.
yeah.
So it's a major issue is contamination and source separation. Takes a lot of
Mhm.
education to get people to understand and value, why it's important. So yeah, that is one of the major challenges. Also, there's so many different materials in packaging and bioplastics. I think a lot of facilities, even industrial facilities, have stopped taking bioplastics just because it's hard to tell like how it was made, what was sourced from, if it's going to decompose well. So that's a major challenge. I think some of the things with compost is like dealing with downstream waste materials is like all the different like materials used in producing packaging or whatever it is, and that can potentially have toxins in it. I was just looking at paper towels, and the conventional paper towels have like so many different chemicals and like toxins like loaded into them. So I think that's something that we like learn a lot about is just like how toxic our product manufacturing is, and we get to deal with that at the end of the life of this product.
I wanted to ask a question about the that 24% number. How do the haulers determine what the percentage of contamination is?
Uh, well, Matthew, I mean, from my experience and what I've seen, and I've seen a contract, so I've seen that number actually written in contracts for franchises, for routes, for however you want to look at it. But to find out how they came up with that number, to me, it's almost like the best number to protect them from having to pay a higher rate, right? That it's no longer organic, it's now trash. But honestly, I've seen it time and time again without a definition of how that number came to be.
Wow. Yeah, that really is a shockingly high number.
It really is. I mean, if you think about it, I used to deal with an average of 6 to 11% contamination, and in any given day, and that was really difficult to manage. And the only reason I found out about it, and I actually just recently seen it and heard it again, um, was because I kept pushing at my facility saying, "Hey guys, we got to start." And no matter how many waste characterizations you did, load inspections you did, you took pictures, you documented, you did all of that, send it on its merry way. Nothing ever, nothing ever. The only thing you ever got was, "Oh yeah, we'll talk to our route supervisor, and we'll address it."
Hmm.
Interesting. you would think that haulers who also operate facilities would not want that in their contract since it doesn't help them. But
It doesn't, Brendan. Think about how, you know, haulers exist. It's that
yeah,
the haulers that have their own facilities, right? So a
yeah,
facility that's bringing in and you have a scale. So every ton that comes across that scale, regardless of what it
it's
is,
money. Yeah,
it's money. It's being charged.
yeah,
So I mean, so sometimes when we talk about education and the public sector or the private sector or stuff like that, sometimes the industrial side and the big haulers need a whole lot of education themselves as well.
it's true. It's
Yep.
true. It's not necessarily all on the generators. Oh,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it's
yeah,
interesting because the contamination issue has been, I would say always, right, a topic of conversation of like, how do we reduce this contamination? Obviously, on site at the facility, they've got massive screens to try to get contamination out that way, and sort lines and pick lines and all of that. Um, but then when we get to the education component, it's always this really nebulous question of like, well, who should be doing the educating? And often it's sort of this like finger pointing, like the jurisdiction needs to do it. No, the hauler needs to do it. No, the composter needs to do it. No, the schools need to do it.
yeah,
And trying to figure out how to bring everyone together into that. And then a little bit to, Lynn's point that the like amount of contamination happening in LA, a lot of people I think have lost faith in anything other than trash. They just sort of assume that like everything is going to the landfill, everything is going to the same place, or maybe I call it the MRF myth. People hear that MRFs exist for recycling and they kind of think, oh, probably the same thing for compost. There's a conveyor belt with robots on it that's picking out all the stuff, so it doesn't matter what I put in there. Um, and and on top of that, I think there's also the lack of understanding of like your food scraps turn into soil and soil grows food, right? We already know that a lot of young people and a lot of people in general are missing that basic connection, right? Of knowing that their food comes from soil, that it like grows in the ground. Yeah, they got places like LA that have very little green space where it's hard, well, relatively little green space, it's hard to have a connection to healthy soil if you've never touched it, or if you don't see it, or if you don't benefit from plants and trees in your everyday life. Um,
yeah.
so I think about that as like, how do we build a compost culture? That's one of the big things we've been talking about partnerships with like community composters or through school education programs. That's kind of a segue into my next question of like hopes for the future, both broadly across composting and maybe also specifically for you if there's a part of this industry that you'd like to go into or explore more or people that you'd like to work with. What are your hopes for your future?
For me, I mean, I do what I do because I love what I do and the industry that I'm in. It's it's ever daily evolving to where I think, and I didn't want to sound negative and throw out these numbers and stuff and all this contamination talk, all that. Things are going in the right direction. Very slow, but it's going in the right direction, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't be here talking about what we're talking about. I wouldn't be traveling across the U.S. and other parts, to do what I do as far as projects and systems and all that. Um, my hopes for the future just really boil down to just more composting and making a compost facility primary. Everywhere that I see, and I've told this to many facilities that I've set up, be ready because composting is a stepchild. If you have a MRF, a landfill, or any other system within that same composting site, you will be the last one on the totem pole, the lowest one on the totem pole to get funding, to get equipment, to get people. So honestly, my hopes for the future is that it becomes more of a primary um, process to any company. haulers, facilities, MRFs, you name it. I just really love to see that mindset change as much as possible because I think if we can make that turn, it'll pay dividends and it'll be just so much better. Regardless of technologies. And I've ran ASPs, windrows, covered ASP, you name it. I'm vastly familiar with all those technologies. And yeah, the technologies are going to do the work, right? It's just a matter of getting that backing, across the industry to say, yep, this is the way. I used to post that a lot on LinkedIn. I stole it from The Mandalorian. This is the way. And it really is. It truly is the way for me personally and professionally, where I think we're headed. My company's motto is, based on future and based on sustainability. So I have really good hopes. Otherwise, I wouldn't keep doing what I'm doing.
I love that. That's such a hopeful message. And I agree. I always tell people, I'm like, well, if we do things right in 30 years, composting is going to be the primary way that we deal with all of our waste. Um, if we can get our act together, like Lynn was saying a little bit on the the kind of products that we consumer products that we allow in the marketplace. Who wants to go next? Talking about your hopes.
I'll go next. Um, I hope for a soil punk future where we live in a society that is built around improving soil health, in all ways, shapes, and form. And, I really would love to see um, just, caring for the environment and our shared resources not be like politically polarizing. Because, to quote a study abroad program I did, nature knows no borders. Like we're all impacted by these things and we should all care about them. And, very much in the same vein, as Caesar, it's just like, this is what we all need to do to ensure our collective future and to ensure that like everyone has access to clean air and clean water and a healthy community, and it does truly, like, healthy communities really do start with healthy soil. So
I love
that's
that vision, Braeden. I relate to that vision. I think aside from building up all the technical education, quality soil, etc., want to build bridges to people who maybe it's not their calling to like get into this. And I want to make it like cool and fun for people. So like I worked with my friends at Integrative Development Initiative. Like last month, we had an event called Soil Fest, and we brought in, like Indigenous medicine drum circle, like soil testing, soil art, compost demonstrations, fermentation demonstrations. We brought in musicians and performers. We did microscope projections with like color filters. There was a local group that does like shadow puppets, and we did like a little microbe shadow puppet theater performance. And it was just super fun and a super nice time. And yeah, I want to collaborate with artists to make microbe art, make compost art. Katya had this cool idea for a compost prom, which I'm all about that and would love to support those kinds of ideas. Like, yeah, let's make it fun. Let's celebrate together. Let's celebrate compost and soil together and let that just inspire us into being better caretakers and supporting a better culture that cares about soil and reducing waste and having healthier packaging materials.
Lynn, thank you for the shout out to Compost Prom.
it.
I think everyone has heard me talk about that.
Yeah,
I'm
we
still
gotta make
trying
it
to make it
happen.
happen. Yeah, we're going to. I think I'll plan it around my 30th birthday. Compost Prom also earlier this year. ACP worked with the California Alliance for Community Composting to host a 4-day art show pop-up, a compost art show in Sacramento that sort of aligned with both the USCC conference and the ILSR Community Composting Forum. But that was a really, really cool experience. We had a couple of great parties there. We had Compost Clown come out and give some really wacky, awesome performances. So yeah, I'm also really excited to see how we can um, continue. I think everybody who works in, not everybody, I'd say most of the people who work in composting have a lot of fun with it. That's why I love the space. Love to spread that joy out even more. And Braeden, to your point of bringing people together, another thing that I love about composting is it's kind of just happens to be sustainable, right? It's not like other, like, oh, you have to buy a reusable water bottle or you have to buy a reusable set of cutlery or something in order to like be sustainable. It's something that does often let us reach across the aisle because people can generally agree, like, wouldn't it be better rather than putting our food scraps into a stinky landfill, we can put them into a compost pile and have healthy soil for farmers? Um, so I see a lot of hope on that side too, and people building relationships over the compost pile. Um,
Relational composting.
Relational composting. I have one more surprise question for you guys that I thought of at the beginning, so sorry for not letting you know ahead of time. And also, anybody on this call, if you guys have a question that you want to drop in the chat, we can try to get to that. But I was at a high school career fair recently, just talking to a bunch of high schoolers. Haven't been on a high school campus in a really long time, so it was really cool to see all these young people. Um, and I think that there's a lot of people who are, you know, looking for work with purpose, looking for a way to connect more deeply, looking for ways to get outside. Um, People who hear about composting think, wow, that's so cool, but what is that? How do I get into it? Which was both the purpose of this webinar, but now I'm going to ask you guys specifically, what advice do you guys have for folks that are thinking about hoping to either get into or transition into this space?
Learn how to wake up early.
Don't worry, Brendan. As you get older, that happens naturally. So,
Advice. Volunteer, volunteer with your local community composter, or if you are in high school and your high school has like an internship requirement, like reach out to your local composting facility, get your hands dirty, learn if it's something that interests you, try it out. Like, exposure is a very powerful thing. And and yeah, don't be afraid to get dirty, literally. And wear your PPE.
Yeah. Yeah, I think volunteering is really helpful. There's a lot of free classes, videos, online courses, workshops people can take to learn more. Attending these kinds of webinars, just getting involved, getting to know people, building relationships with people, going to the compost conferences, going to the site visits. All of these opportunities can help. When you're in the community and opportunities come up, then you'll be ready to receive them. And it's a little bit of make your own way, unless, I think there's more opportunities now for facility operators in industrial sites. So that's definitely like an opportunity. You learn those skills, like that's definitely a way to get in the door. But yeah, just keep trying different things, keep creating, keep innovating, and keep serving like the needs of the people around you, and you'll create a path for yourself.
Yeah, completely agree with everything that Lynn and Brendan is saying. The biggest thing that comes into my mind, and this is just from exposure for the last 4 years, and mostly the last 4 years, to be honest with you, is no matter where you go, no matter what you do, keep an open mind. Too many times I run into consultants who, have an abundant amount of education, they have a doctorate, they have this, they have that. And oh my God, too many times it's just the negative side of, oh no, that doesn't look right, or this doesn't, this is the way it's supposed to be, or this is the only way it should be done. And it's like, no, I'm sorry, but there's many ways to skin a cat. As long as you get to that same finish line, together is really what, to me is the most important. Um, too many times, I just see way too much bickering over small little things and just, if you're going to get into this, keep an open mind, listen to the ones who've been doing it forever, but also listen to those that are coming into this, from the very beginning. And somewhere in the middle, you're going to find the sweet spot, to make this happen the correct way, with the positive outcome. Um, to me, that's going to be my biggest advice, because I just too many times have seen closed-minded, can't teach an old dog new tricks. I mean, it's just that's my biggest thing, is just keep an open mind and just hear people out, Don't take, positive criticism as negative criticism. I mean, it's just that's the biggest thing I've seen.
I like that, Caesar. It's true in all aspects of life,
Yep,
for
exactly.
sure. Um, yeah.
And what is life if not a giant compost pile?
Yeah. You don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
It's
We're
just
all at
it's so
different
true.
stages of composting.
We're all
Yeah.
at different points of decomposition.
Yes.
I don't know. We'll workshop that a little bit.
I mean,
We'll see how that goes.
hopefully you're not decomposing while you're still alive. But if you want to decompose once you're dead, I'm your guy. I can help you with
Braeden,
that.
I did want to ask you about that. How did that pivot happen? What was exciting to you about getting into the mortuary space?
Um, so I mean, I've always been very much aware of my own mortality. I do have I've had a lifelong chronic kidney disease that have just, always made me very aware of my own mortality. And even before back when I was farming, I'm just like, oh, just like put me in the ground and plant a garden on top of me and harvest my food, or harvest the food that's grown from my body, and celebrate my life. That was always like my ideal um, way to die, or what I wanted when I died. And I started when I started composting, I was like, oh, like I just want to be composted. And that was in 2012, and in I guess 2018, Washington State legalized human composting as a viable option for disposition. And I've always just kind of like kept an eye on it. And it's like, wow, of course, like that's a thing. I worked, or I've learned a lot from Gene Bonital over at Cornell Waste Management Institute, who like specializes in farm mortality waste composting. So it's just like, yeah, like obviously this is a thing. And it's something that I just have resonated with very, very deeply. And as the Black Soldier Fly project I was working on kind of was taking a slow death, I more and more was thinking about what I wanted to do. And, like composting for waste management is wonderful, and it's something I've always been very passionate about. But here's an application of my skill set and knowledge that's more personal, and something that I believe and I'm seeing also resonates with a lot of people, because I don't know many people these days who are like, oh yeah, like I love cremation. And I don't know many people who really care about, a traditional burial. But that's kind of always been people's two choices. You have to choose between cremation and burial, and burial is wildly unaffordable these days. And with the exception of like certain religions, I don't know anyone who really just like vibes with it. But what I do know is that so many people want to be a tree. And there was this viral article about the tree pod, which turns out isn't a real thing. But because it was an artist's it was like a thesis project. It was an artist's renditioning of a concept. Practically doesn't work. Your decomposing body is a terrible environment for a plant to grow in. You know, it's unstable. The acids are going to be a terrible place for the plant. It's just like immature compost can harm plants. That's what you are at that stage. Um, but it planted a seed in people's minds that presented them with an option that was more in line with how we all evolved. We evolved to decompose. It's out just like our food evolved to decompose. Like there's actually a huge parallel between the shift in how we've managed our waste from a linear extractive model with landfilling to how we've treated our dead by embalming them, putting them in a casket, and then putting them in a lawn crypt, which is, I describe, a box inside of a box where there's no interaction between you and the soil. You're not actually returning to the earth. You're just in a box for all eternity, and taking up space permanently with a lawn that has its own ecological impact. So this alternative is more in line with, not more, it is 100% in line with the natural system. And I think there's nothing more beautiful than returning everything you've borrowed from the soil and the sea, for those of us who eat seafood. Like every cell in our body was built from nutrients that came from the soil and the sea, caveat, and giving it back. Just like participating in the natural cycle of life. So that's how I got there.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's also this shift that's happening, within composting food scraps and yard waste. There's this conversation that's like, no, we're not just dealing with waste, we're recovering a resource, to give that back to the soil and to be part of that like reciprocal cycle that you're talking about. And I love to me, composting is a very spiritual thing as well. And I think that
Yeah,
the human composting lens of that like can't help but bring that spiritual component into it. One of
absolutely.
my friends and another colleague in the compost space, Cass Marquetos, who runs a volunteer runs a community compost site and has written a couple of different books on composting. Um, she talks about uh, how she has this theory that we can measure a society's like spiritual health by how comfortable we are with decay and death. And I think that comes up a lot in compost too, of like the ick factor around food scraps,
Mhm.
and wanting to deal with them at all, or wanting to like be aware and acknowledge this thing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining. It was so wonderful to hear all about your stories. Um, To Lynn's point about getting involved in composting, I will just do a quick little plug for the Compost Caravan. It's a new program that we launched at ACP. We are caravanning all around California, and gathering locally and regionally to learn about both the potential uses of compost in your area, the different composters that already exist there, and ways that compost can help solve some of the most pertinent issues that you guys might be facing. Anthony Smith says Compost Caravan was awesome. Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate it. We're so glad that you were there. I'm going to go ahead and close us out unless we have any last words from our speakers.
Just want to say thank you for the opportunity, and it's
Yeah,
been
thank
lovely
you.
sharing.
Absolutely. Thank you for putting this together. It's always fun to get out there. Yeah, let's just keep promoting.
Yeah, it was a fun conversation. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Yeah, and thank you guys so much for being here. This was wonderful. All right. Have a great day. Keep composting, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you guys. See ya.
Bye.